Theta?
The Theta.
Oh,
it was not a Tarragon audience.
Right.
It was not a Tarragon audience or a Royal Alexandra audience or the kind of audience that went to Theatre in the Dell at the time or Old Angelo's where they did those singing makes you happy, kind of reviews with, well-scrubbed kids singing songs about the Spadina streetcar. This was somebody going on and talking about trying to force anal sex on his wife. This had never been done in Toronto before. Well, a third of the audience used to walk out every night. A third of the audience in 1978 used to walk out every night. And I don't mean just stroll out. I mean walk out in a huff. People would scream at me on stage because I was the MC. People would scream at me on stage. What are you doing? There are people here. There are young people here. How can you do this? And what I would do is I would take money out of my wallet and I would say, get out, get out. The Jew has your money. The Jew has your money. And then I would chase them out. And there were doors along the side of the club that went directly out into the street. A bunch of them, like 6 doors. So it was really easy to get out. So I would go and I would chase them out. I would go and as they were opening, I'd kick them in the ass and say, "Get out, get out, get out!" And people would go crazy. The 30% who left never came back, but the 70% who stayed came back night after night after night and created, one of the biggest hits this city's ever seen.
So that was my mom.
Tomatoes, eggs. Well, we never actually sold them. We would never have anybody actually throw a tomato and egg at a performer, but just the suggestion of it was enough to get the performer to go, oh, okay, this isn't working. Another thing we used to have is we used to have the Crucify Him tape. We used to take the tape from Jesus Christ Superstar that goes, crucify him, crucify him. And I would dress up as, Pontius Pilate, and then I would have a huge cross, and I would bring the cross on stage and make the comic who was bombing walk off the stage as the music or song would go, crucify him, crucify him. We had this thing called a disaster tape where I had a book. I was fascinated at the time because I have a macabre, sick sense of humor, as you can probably guess just in the last 15 minutes that we've been talking. I have this macabre, sick sense of humor, and I used to collect books of disasters, like the Hindenburg disaster, the Lusitania. So if a guy was bombing, we had a tape of a car crash that would go on. It would go, eek, and it would follow by, it's a disaster. Then I'd walk on with this big book of disasters, and I would read from the book of disasters, like I would pick the Japan, 1920 Japan department store fire, and then I would read from this thing, and it would end off with saying, 74 people died, and then it would go, another YukYuks disaster. It's pretty funny stuff.
It sounds like when a comedian would screw up, would be funnier for the audience.
Well, we had to find a way, because at the time, there were so few comedians who could really handle the job in Toronto, maybe only a half a dozen, maybe a dozen, that we had to find a way to make it funny for the people who kept going up there who just couldn't hack it. But I'm telling you, a lot of the people who got that tape or got that hook became good comics. It became just part of the ritual, like a hazing ritual, if you weren't any good. Now, you asked me about the roots of YukYuks and the name. I realized later on that there was something operating subconsciously for me of why I liked the name YukYuks and why it resonated. I could have called the club Giggles or Chuckles or Happies or any of these kinds of names.
Those are quite middle-class names, though, Giggles.
That's right. But they're also something else. I realized later on that laughter comes from various different parts of our body depending on what we're laughing at. And this is kind of like a chakra theory of comedy. I mean, when I read a New Yorker cartoon, I'm kind of laughing from the place between my eyes. It's an intellectual, a cerebral laugh. When I laugh at a romantic comedy, I'm laughing from maybe my heart place. But I wanted a place from the beginning where you didn't have light little laughs. You had very deep...
Laughing from the crotch.
Laughing from the gut.
Yeah, I think I know where this is going.
Well, laughing from the gut, if not the crotch. And that sound, yuck, yuck, is a full-throated, full-bodied, lusty, Zorba the Greek type laugh. And that's what I wanted these clubs to be. And so I didn't know that at the time, but you know how sometimes subconsciously you'll do something that is right, although you can't intellectualize it for a decade later.
Right.
That's another reason I think I called it YukYuks rather than say Titters. There's a Titters in Ohio, and I guess if you go to Titter, and I guess if you go to Titters, you sit there and you laugh like this. But I didn't want people to laugh like that. I felt, having gone through more therapy probably than anybody but Woody Allen, I'd gone through therapy all my life, and I knew that I had a Freudian view of life, that on the surface we all follow this sort of these social mores which we don't believe in, and underneath we break through the repression to what we really feel. Well, I felt that the comedy, and when you do comedy and you make people laugh, the best kind of comedy is where you break through the repression and you get them to laugh from a very deep place. Usually those things revolve around things like taboos, like sex, drugs, money, family, pop culture, all the inappropriate things.
Inappropriateness, and you think about Richard Pryor and how he could be vulnerable up on that stage, exposing himself.
Yes, that's right.
And you're crying and laughing at the same time, and you really are.
Well, I used to go over to my friend's house for dinner, and his parents, very proper parents, I would start talking, and his mother would say, Mark, please, some things we don't talk about at the dinner table. And I realized that's all I wanted to talk about were those things. So I had to find this place, create this environment where I could do that, and my friends who were the same could do that as well.